March 27, 1995, 8:30 in the morning. Milan is waking up under a gray spring sky that has not yet decided to commit to warmth. On Via Palestro, a quiet residential street in one of the city's older quarters, a man in an immaculate suit climbs a short flight of marble stairs toward his office. He is 46 years old. His name is on buildings, on handbags, on the lips of every fashion editor in the world. But it is no longer on any share certificate. He sold that right 2 years ago for approximately $170 million. He does not see the man behind him. The man is dressed well, which is fitting for this neighborhood. He raises a pistol and fires 3 times into the climber's back. The climber turns, a reflex, and 2 more shots strike his face. The building's concierge, Giuseppe Onorato, runs toward the sound and is shot in the arm. The killer steps over the body, walks to a green Renault Clio idling at the curb, and disappears into Milan's morning traffic. The entire execution takes less than 15 seconds. Onorato cradles the dying man's head on the red marble floor. He will later tell reporters a single sentence: "He died in my arms." The killer is a Sicilian pizza maker named Benedetto Serrallo. He was paid $12,000 for the job. The woman who ordered the killing paid $365,000 in total. She was the dead man's ex-wife. On the day of the murder, she wrote one word in her Cartier diary, in capital letters, inside a black border: Paradisos, the Greek word for paradise. But the bullet that killed Maurizio Gucci was not fired by a hitman alone. It was the final shot in a 72-year war that began with a boy loading luggage at the most prestigious hotel in London. In 1897, a boy named Guccio Gucci arrived in London from Florence. He was the son of a craftsman whose business had failed. He found work at the Savoy Hotel as a porter and lift attendant, carrying trunks for Russian counts and American railroad magnates. He stayed 5 years. What Guccio did at the Savoy was not work. It was study. He watched how wealthy people announced themselves through objects: a trunk with perfect stitching, a travel case in a leather so supple it seemed to breathe. He noticed that the rich did not simply buy possessions. They bought signals. They bought separations from everyone who could not afford the same. He was specifically inspired by an English luggage maker called Cave & Sons. He sketched designs in whatever moments he could steal. And when he returned to Florence in 1902, he carried something more valuable than wages. He carried a thesis. Luxury is not excess. Luxury is precision pursued until it becomes a language only the wealthy can read. In 1921, Guccio opened a leather luggage shop on Via della Vigna Nuova in Florence. He was 40 years old. The workshop eventually grew to 60 craftsmen, and on the lining of his suitcases in the 1930s, he placed a small insignia, a lift attendant in double-breasted livery, holding a piece of luggage. He called it the Lift Boy. It was his private memorial to the job that had taught him everything. In 1935, Mussolini invaded Ethiopia. The League of Nations imposed an embargo on Italy, and leather became impossible to source. Most craftsmen would have stopped. Guccio experimented: raffia, jute, wicker, canvas, bamboo. The bamboo bag, launched in 1947 with handles carved from bamboo because leather was still scarce, became one of the 20th century's most recognized accessories. Constraint forced invention. It was a pattern the brand would repeat, though never by choice. Guccio died on January 2, 1953. He left the company to his 3 sons, Aldo, Vasco, and Rodolfo. He had built something that worked. His sons would build something enormous, and their sons would set it on fire. Aldo Gucci was the engine. He opened a second store in Rome in 1938, defying his father, who believed Florence was enough. By 1953, he was in New York, at 7 East 58th Street on 5th Avenue. He earned an economics doctorate and insisted everyone call him Dr. Gucci. In a 1984 interview with the Christian Science Monitor, he appeared impeccably dressed in a pinstriped suit and jewel-toned tie, speaking in a flowing cadence punctuated by expressive gestures. He had the confidence of a man who believed his taste was a public service. By 1969, 84,000 Gucci moccasins were selling in the United States in a single year. A pair entered the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art. By the late 1970s, Aldo controlled what New Yorkers called Gucci City, 2 corners of 5th Avenue and 54th Street. The family had arrived. But arrival created a problem Guccio never faced. The sons had to share, and sharing, for men raised to believe their name entitled them to rule, was intolerable. Aldo began licensing the Gucci name to anyone who would pay. Sneakers, cigarette holders, keychains, toilet seat covers. By the mid-1980s, the Gucci label appeared on 22,000 different products, sold through more than 1,000 franchise stores. Revenue rose. The brand was hollowed out. Gucci was becoming a joke. It would take a total stranger from Texas to make it dangerous again. But first, the family had to finish destroying each other. Don Mello, the former Bergdorf Goodman president who would later be hired to fix the damage, said that by 1989, no one would dream of wearing Gucci. Meanwhile, Aldo's son Paolo wanted to launch his own line under the family name. Aldo refused and fired him. At a 1982 board meeting, the argument turned physical. Paolo later alleged that relatives smashed a tape recorder over his head. He sued. That lawsuit is what destroyed the family, not the violence. The paperwork. Documents produced in Paolo's court filings revealed that Aldo had been diverting corporate income through sham foreign corporations for a decade. The Internal Revenue Service opened an investigation in March of 1983. Paolo did not intend to hand his father to federal prosecutors. He simply wanted what he believed was his. But intention does not matter when the evidence is in a filing cabinet, and the filing cabinet is in a courtroom. While his uncle's tax schemes were unraveling, Maurizio Gucci was preparing to seize everything. Maurizio's father, Rodolfo, a former film actor, died in May of 1983. He left his son 50% of the company. But there was a problem. Rodolfo's share certificates had supposedly been signed over before his death, saving Maurizio roughly 13 billion lire in inheritance tax. The signatures were forged. 2 days after the funeral, Maurizio and an advisor had arranged for a woman named Roberta Castel to imitate Rodolfo's handwriting on 5 share certificates. In 1984, Maurizio offered his cousin Paolo $22 million for his 3.3% stake. Paolo accepted. Their combined 53% gave them a majority. At the annual board meeting, they voted to dissolve the existing board and install Maurizio as chairman. On October 31, 1984, Aldo Gucci was forced to sign over control of the empire he had built across 3 decades. His files and office paintings were dumped on the street. The company had not just changed hands, it had been decapitated, and the man now holding the crown had no idea how heavy it was. On January 17, 1986, Aldo Gucci stood in federal court in Manhattan. He was 81 years old. He had evaded $7.4 million in taxes on $11.8 million in unreported income between 1977 and 1982. In 1979, he paid $27,000 to the tax authorities when he owed $2 million. He wept, handed over $1 million check, and pleaded guilty. At his sentencing that September, Judge Vincent Broderick gave him 1 year. Aldo made a rambling, tearful plea. Then he looked around the courtroom and spoke his final public words on the matter. Some of them have done their duty, and others have the satisfaction of their revenge. Only God will be their judge. He served 5 months at a federal prison camp in Florida. He was 81 years old. His son Paolo, the one whose lawsuit had exposed him, was by then isolated and bankrupt. He would die impoverished. Aldo himself died in 1990, 4 years after his conviction. He never regained control of anything. Maurizio now had the company. He also had no idea what to do with it. His vision was grand and vague. He wanted Gucci to feel round and brown and soft to a woman's hand, as he described it to colleagues. He opened a lavish new headquarters in Milan. No expense spared, priceless antiques. He eliminated the double G monogram overnight. An insider would later explain why this was catastrophic. The GG was 70% of sales. A former colleague would later describe Maurizio as a man with grand vision who was utterly incapable of execution. By 1991, Gucci could not pay its employees. It could not pay its suppliers. Revenue had collapsed to roughly $200 million a year, and the company was reporting substantial net losses. When Domenico De Sole arrived in Florence to take over, the InvestCorp chief financial officer told him he hoped De Sole could save the situation. Gucci had become, in his words, an albatross around their neck. In September of 1993, InvestCorp bought Maurizio's remaining 50%. He received approximately $170 million. The Gucci family was entirely out of Gucci. The company, 72 years after a lift attendant, opened a leather shop in Florence. No member of the family owned a single share. Maurizio fell into a depression. He spent months on his boat. He was $40 million in personal debt. He began planning a tourism company called Via Italia. He started seeing a woman named Paola Franchi and planned to marry her. His ex-wife learned about the wedding plans. Patrizia Reggiani had been born Patrizia Martinelli in a poor suburb of Milan. Her mother was a dishwasher. At 12, her mother married a wealthy transport entrepreneur named Ferdinando Reggiani, who adopted the girl and gave her his name. A childhood friend later said the early poverty left an everlasting impression. Patrizia needed a big name and a fat wallet. She would settle for nothing less. She met Maurizio in 1970 and married him in 1972. Not a single Gucci attended the wedding. Rodolfo had tried to get the Archbishop of Milan to stop it. In May of 1985, Maurizio packed a suitcase and left. He did not tell Patrizia himself. He sent a friend, days later. She described her divorce settlement of roughly $1 million a year as little more than a plate of lentils. A reporter once asked her about the luxuries she refused to surrender. Her response became famous. "I would rather cry in a Rolls-Royce than be happy on a bicycle." In 1991, Patrizia told her housekeeper she wanted to see Maurizio dead. The conversation was recorded on tape and handed to Maurizio's divorce lawyer. She meant it. Through her friend Pina Ariema, a woman she had met at a spa on the Italian island of Ischia in 1976. She arranged a chain of intermediaries. Ariema contacted Ivano Savioni, a hotel night porter. Savioni recruited a driver named Orazio Cicala and a gunman named Benedetto Ciraulo, a Sicilian pizza maker with serious financial problems and a criminal record. If Maurizio remarried, Patrizia's $1 million a year lifestyle was about to be cut in half. Her daughters could be disinherited entirely. On March 27, 1995, Ciraulo followed Maurizio Gucci up the stairs of Via Palestro 20 and ended the dynasty with 4 bullets. It took the police nearly 2 years. In January of 1997, Savioni confessed under questioning. All 5 were arrested on January 31st. When police arrived at Patrizia's apartment that morning, she told them she knew why they were there. At trial, she was theatrical. A green rosary, a nurse at her side asking if she needed an injection for seizures. She wore a Swatch watch, not Gucci. She testified with a sentence that captured everything about how she understood the world. "I asked everyone, as you now know. I would have asked the man behind the delicatessen counter. It had become an obsession for me." She was sentenced to 29 years. Reduced to 26 on appeal, she served 18. In 2011, offered early release on the condition that she find a job. She declined, saying she had never worked a day in her life and was not about to start. She was released in 2016. She still collects approximately $1.5 million per year in alimony from the estate of the man she had murdered. Italian courts have upheld the payments repeatedly. The divorce settlement was signed in 1993, 2 years before the murder. Legally, they are separate matters. In the weeks after Maurizio's death, no one at Gucci mourned. They were too busy trying to save a company that had been dying longer than anyone wanted to admit. The family's last heir was gone, but the brand was still bleeding. Gucci was not just a crime scene, it was a failing business that needed a resurrection. The rescue had actually begun 2 years before the murder. In November of 1989, Dawn Mello left her position as president of Bergdorf Goodman to join Gucci as creative director. She surveyed the damage. 22,000 products, over 1,000 stores, a name that signaled nothing except availability. She began cutting. 1,000 stores became 180. 22,000 products became 7,000. And in 1990, she hired a 29-year-old Texan with an architecture degree from Parsons and 2 years at Perry Ellis to design women's ready-to-wear. His name was Tom Ford. Ford was not famous. He was not even particularly experienced, but he possessed something that no Gucci had demonstrated in decades: the ability to make people want things they did not know they wanted. When Mello returned to Bergdorf Goodman in 1994, Investcorp's leadership wanted to fire Ford. They saw no reason to keep a relatively unknown designer in the creative director role of a company that needed serious restructuring, not fashion experiments. The man who stopped them was Domenico De Sole. De Sole was a Harvard-trained tax lawyer from Rome who had come to Gucci in 1984 because Rodolfo Gucci was his client. He had spent a decade cleaning up the family's legal disasters. Now he was chief executive, and he believed in Ford. De Sole later explained that Investcorp wanted to fire Ford, and he thought that was the worst idea anyone had proposed. Ford's first solo collection debuted in 1995, the same year Maurizio was murdered. Hip-hugging velvet trousers, silk shirts unbuttoned, stiletto heels. The collection was provocative, unapologetically sensual, and nothing like the Gucci anyone remembered. Fashion editors called it a sensation. Within months, the brand was on every red carpet and magazine cover. Ford had made a 74-year-old heritage brand feel contemporary and dangerous. Ford never met Maurizio. When the Ridley Scott film depicted them toasting together after a runway show, Ford publicly corrected the record. Maurizio had been bought out a full year before Ford became creative director. They never shared a room. Dassault matched Ford's creative ambition with operational brutality. He terminated the remaining licensing agreements, walking away from short-term revenue to rebuild exclusivity. He raised prices. He doubled the number of supplier workshops from 37 to 74 while demanding delivery discipline. He increased advertising from $6 million in 1993 to $40 million by 1996. The results were unlike anything the luxury industry had seen. Revenue went from $263 million in 1994 to $500 million in 1995. To $975 million in 1997, past $1 billion in 1998. By 2003, Gucci Group revenue was $2.5 billion, a tenfold increase in 9 years. The October 1995 public offering priced at $22 per share. Within 6 weeks, shares had doubled to 36. The company was valued at over $2 billion. Investcorp, which had paid roughly $350 million total for a company that could not pay wages 2 years earlier, exited with an estimated 5 to 6 times return on investment. But success created a new predator. In January of 1999, Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy chairman Bernard Arnault began quietly buying Gucci shares. By mid-January, he held 34.4%. Dassault received a phone call informing him the world's largest luxury conglomerate was attempting a hostile takeover of his company. Dassault's response was immediate and ruthless. On February 19th, he deployed an employee stock ownership plan that issued 37 million new shares overnight, diluting Arnault's stake from 34% to approximately 20%. Then he brought in French billionaire François Pinault as a white knight. Pinault paid $3 billion for a 40% stake. Arnault was furious. He bid $85 per share, valuing Gucci at $5 billion. He sued in Dutch courts. The legal war lasted 2.5 years. In September of 2001, Pinault paid Arnault $806 million for his remaining shares. Arnault exited with a capital gain of 760 million euros. He called it a financial success, but Gucci had escaped. The brand remained independent. In November of 2003, Pinault completed his full buyout of Gucci Group for $8.8 billion. He wanted management control. Ford and Dassault wanted the autonomy that had produced a decade of unprecedented growth. They could not agree. In April of 2004, both resigned. Dassault would later say they felt they had done their part, and it was time to move on. Today, Gucci generates 7.65 billion euros in annual revenue. It employs over 20,000 people across 529 stores. The brand is valued at $15 to $18 billion. No member of the Gucci family owns a single share. No member of the Gucci family holds any role. The name that once guaranteed wealth now primarily guarantees attention, and not always the kind anyone would want. Benedetto Serrallo, the pizza maker who killed Maurizio Gucci for $12,000, was sentenced to life in prison. The sentence was reduced to 28 years on appeal. He was released. In April of 2025, he shot his 37-year-old son Gaetano in the face during an argument about a scratch on a car, then turned the gun on himself. He died in a hospital in Pisa, aged 63. His son survived. He posted a single message online: "I forgive you for the harm you have done to me, but not for the harm you have inflicted on yourself." Patrizia Reggiani lives in Milan. She is 77. She still collects her alimony. In June of 2026, a Milan court invalidated her mother's will. She may inherit an additional 20 million euros. There is an Italian proverb that several people quoted when asked about the Gucci family. The first generation creates, the second generation expands, the third generation destroys. Gucci built something in 1921 that proved larger than any individual who carried his name. Larger than the sons who expanded it. Larger than the grandsons who fought over it. Larger than the woman who killed for it. Larger than the outsiders who saved it. He wanted to build a dynasty. Instead, he built a brand. The dynasty lasted 72 years. The brand is still here. Whether Gucci would see that as success or failure depends on what you think he was building in that Florence workshop. a family legacy, or something meant to outlive one? The answer is on the lining of a 1930s suitcase, a small insignia of a lift attendant holding a piece of luggage. The lift boy never represented a dynasty. It represented a craft, and craft, unlike blood, does not destroy itself.